Murray Harrington, our external appointee, staff, press and people viewing this by live viewing. Welcome to the Audit Risk Finance Committee on Tuesday the 1st of February, February 2020. Is there any call for apologies, please? None. Extraordinary business? None. Declaration of interests? None. Number 4, confirmation of minutes. Everyone has read them. Are there any changes to be made? If not, could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll move it.
Councillor Wilson, is there a seconder? Councillor Fulham. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. We received the Bancorp Treasury Report for December 2019. I hope you all had the 2019 December one. Do we've got a mover or a seconder to receive it? Councillor Falloon, do we've got a seconder? Councillor Murray Harrington. Everyone in favour, please say aye. Carried. Any questions? Or anything you want to say, Paul, regarding that? No? Councillor Wilson.
This is historical, the way things are at the moment. Financial things are in a state of flux, aren't they? This could be out of date within a week or two.
Mr. Chairman, not really. The interest rate swaps are sitting there on these, so it shouldn't change too much. The only thing that would likely change this is that we get, when we get our credit rating, it may change. But other than that, this is pretty static at the moment.
Any other questions? None. Then we go to financial variations report, December 2019. Thank you, Rachel, being there. Could I ask you a question, or a request really? Just for the sake of some of the new councillors and some of the oldies, could you just explain how that has been done and why it's been done this way? Is it a possibility? Thank you.
Sure, definitely. So what we do here with the variance report is everything is reported year to date, and that just takes out any of the sort of monthly timing variances and fluctuations that you may otherwise see. And so for December, we are halfway through our financial year, so you would be expecting your income and expenditure to be around the 50% mark. And in general, that is what you see through the activity reports. So rather than looking at the variance column specifically, I would actually go across. You've got a percentage of forecast column. If that is around the 50%, they're tracking about right for where you'd want to be at this time of year for 31st December. Where there are variances, what we have focused on are the large ones. And again, that's to really focus attention on the important issues, what may be missing, what may be sort of, may need to be put off, in particular with CapEx expenditure. It may need to be put off until the next year. If it's over $100,000 variance and it's expected to be a permanent variance at year end, then we've asked for an explanation. If the business areas have told us it's not a permanent variance, that means it's just timing and they're expecting it to catch up over the rest of this year. So at year end, they're expecting their expenditure or their income to be where they've said it's going to be.
Thank you, Rachel. Are there any questions, just general questions, before we go into the report? I will do the report page by page, just to go through it for everyone, if it's easiest.
Just looking at your variances, the variances, and you've identified them under each activity, but are any of those variances carried through from previous years?
The variances that we're reporting on are this year's numbers. So that's not to say there hasn't been carried forward into this year, but we haven't broken that down. So what we've got in our data set and in our report are what we have said we would spend for this year. So for example, capital expenditure may include items that have been carried over into this year, but I can't tell you off the top of my head what those are.
But just,
Councillor Falloon.
oh,
I
sorry.
just have to do this. Right?
But just looking at it, I mean, we don't know the timing of when our capital expenditure is going to be, but if you're going to have capital expenditure carried over from one year to the next, how long is that same item of capital expenditure going to be carried forward until we exactly know when or if it will be spent?
You would expect that if it had been carried forward from, for example, last year into this year, that it would be spent in this year. Otherwise, you would have expected it to be carried forward into a future year and included in a future year budget. But that's really up in the air. It depends entirely on the projects as well. But the expectation would be if something has been budgeted in one year and is carried forward, it would be done in that following year.
Paul?
Through you, Mr Chairman, the carryovers are identifiable through a report that would have come to council back in August last year, where the carryovers from the previous year were in an actual report, because carryovers are approved by council before they're carried over. So if you're interested to know what the breakdown of those carryovers were, we could supply that. It was in an April open council meeting agenda.
Right, I'm quite happy to go page by page. Oh, sorry.
Well, look,
Murray.
it was the same sort of question, really, and we talked about it at the last meeting, but what's the process around where we've identified a significant, we call it a favourable variance, but in my view it's almost unfavourable because we haven't spent the money sooner rather than later. What's the process and the rigour around pushing the workflows as hard as we can to get the spend happening earlier rather than later? Because the numbers themselves tell part of the story, the rest of the story tells the real story, if you like.
Hamish?
So assuming we're talking about capital, yeah. We've reflected around this table previously that across the whole of New Zealand, the planning for infrastructure spend, which tends to be our CapEx requirement at a local government level, has complications around planning that sometimes requires consents that are slower to get in than thought, or additional consents that are required, particularly resource consents, that sometimes planning for a big infrastructure spend, new information comes to light and it causes us to reflect on whether or not the proposed project is the best way, or does it cover everything that it should, or does it prepare ourselves for the future. So there's a whole range of issues why CapEx right across New Zealand in the public sector seems to lag behind the ambitions to get things done. So at the time of setting a budget, we might see an issue, think about the solution, plan to do it, get the resource allocated, and then find that it's not always possible to actually do that in the time period that we initially planned. So we're trying to get better at that, and there are comments across the sector, across the whole of New Zealand, that we all need to get better at that. In terms of pushing as hard as possible to get things done, then that is what we attempt to do, but within the realms of the resources that we have to get things done. And it's not always possible to wind up a major capital project that is still being defined as to its final scope and shape to get that done. One of the ones we have spent a lot of time and effort on is roading in particular, and trying to get earlier and earlier in the planning cycle, i.e. the start of the financial year, to have those roading projects clearly defined, planned, tendered, and in the workflows. And I think we've seen this year that we're in a strong position in terms of the work we plan to do around roading being done. We've also had a benign construction season weather-wise, and so the work has been able to flow through pretty effectively this summer. But some of the other projects are not as easy to speed up or put extra attention on to get them done. We endeavour to, and the sentiment is acknowledged and respected, and we do the best we can.
Is that answer, are you happy with that answer, or you've got something else to ask?
No, I'm trying to understand the rationale. The capital numbers are quite chunky when they're not spent, and as long as we're doing everything we can, understand the encumbrances. We had quite a long conversation last time, and there'll be flow-on impacts for it, as I guess my concern from not getting budgeted capital spend into the infrastructure. So as long as we are comfortable we're doing absolutely everything we can, and there's no other levers we can pull, then I suppose that's the answer to the question.
Something I thought of just listening to it. Is there an option that we can get something back if it doesn't work properly? So if it starts taking too long, could we get something back to this committee that what tells us that the reason is not being spent? I know it's in the variance as well.
So that's a fair point. I think what this report is trying to do is highlight where we are anticipating delay or a permanent variance within this year. What we try and do with the comments that are in there is reflect on why. Can those comments be a little more specific? Then that's a fair point to raise. Can the explanations give a little more light on the issue? Then perhaps we can look at that and try and make sure that the elected members have the greatest degree of clarity. But the intention of this report is to give you the eyes on it as early as possible and the reasons why. But if those reasons are a little bit generic or once over lightly, then we can have a look at that.
Okay, thank you. Page 3 and 4.
Yep.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Page 4. Page possible road rail interface improvement. Where does that come from? What does that entail?
Through the chair, that's Kiwi Rail's crossings, I think, in discussion with them and planning of that work and budgeting for it. We have budgeted for it in the past year or two, and they haven't approached us to do the work at the time that we have budgeted, so it's just working in conjunction with them and adjusting our budget accordingly to fit in to when they do the work.
Thank you, Miss.
Is that East Street, is it? East Street, Walnut Avenue crossing we're talking about, or what?
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure which ones, but I don't believe it's those ones.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
We were going to upgrade the RDR bridges this year, but it's been delayed, I see. Is there a reason why we're delayed? Because upgrading those bridges are, people have been waiting some time so they can use them to get the heavy vehicles over them.
Yeah, I thought it was because the RDA was not emptied out, but...
Yeah, through the chair, there was a delay with shutdown, and then also we decided to put all three out together for design and the work coupled all together as one big project. So that has been awarded now and will be taking place. We originally were going to do one at a time, but now we're going to be doing all three as part of one contract.
Do we know when we expect to have them completed?
I'll get Brian Firth to confirm that at the next Infrastructure Services Committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. 5 and 6. 6 and 7. Oh, no, 7 and 8, sorry. 9 and 10. 11, 12.
Yep.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Bottom of page 12. Implementation of a new computer system. I hope that's not a case of if we save $1 million or whatever with the pool, let's find somewhere else to spend it. I've never heard of anything about a new computer system at the EA Networks.
Mr. McCann.
Through the chair, that's a new booking system to replace our current system, which is proving problematic. So it's really an upgrade, a new system that can handle bookings a lot simpler. And there will be a saving ongoing with the introduction of that new system.
Councillor Falloon.
These funds may be used if council decides. So when will this come to council?
Through the chair, at the next Infrastructure Services Committee meeting, we'll have a report on the Learn to Swim figures and the pool extension to give you that information for a decision.
Thank you, Mr. McCann. Page 13 and 14. 15 and 16.
On page 13,
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
we're going to survey the titles at Lake Clearwater. It's not going to be done this financial year. Is there a reason it's not going to be done this financial year? Because we have been waiting on them.
Okay. Paul, you want to answer to
Chairman,
that?
I'm not aware of the reason why it's been delayed, but I will come back to you on that.
Thank you, Paul. 15, 16. 17, 18. 19, 20. 21, 22. 23, 24. 25, 26. Councillor Falloon.
Just coming back to page 22.
22.
It's all very well having a balance sheet, but a balance sheet is useless unless you've got something to compare it to. Wouldn't it be useful to have the balance sheet as at balance date when we start the year, and then we have something to compare as to how the year is going from a balance sheet point of view?
Yeah, we can absolutely add that in.
Thank you, Rachel. No. 27. No one bingo. Then we are to the end of the report. Thank you. We've got a mover in a second on that. So basically that closes up the public part of the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee meeting. Is there a mover and a seconder, please? No movers, no seconders? Councillor.
I'll second.